The conversation you are about to hear was recorded in 2020 during the height of the global pandemic. And now, Global Comedy Studios presents, Is This a Bad Time to Talk?
Okay, I'm calling my friend Aasif Mandvi to chat for a little bit for the podcast.
Hello.
Hello, Aasif Mandvi?
Yes, that's him.
Aasif, this is Ali. Is this a bad time to talk?
This is a terrible, terrible time to talk. The worst time to talk.
Aasif, my word, thank you for taking time. This what day is it? Tuesday, April 28th, 2020, during the pandemic?
I don't even know. Honestly, Ali, you just gave me that information. I have no idea what day it is anymore. I don't know. Do we have weekends anymore? There's no such thing as weekends anymore.
If anything, I've given you the date and time, and that used to be worth something. It's around 2 o'clock in the afternoon.
It's around 2 o'clock? Okay, yeah. I mean, my life is just a Groundhog's Day at this point. It's the same. It's just, slightly different, but basically the same every day.
Well, I know you got a lot going on, and I thank you for taking my phone call first and foremost, because it's not expected, and I appreciate that. And I'm here to listen.
Honestly didn't know it was you calling. I did not know. I picked up, but it was a New York number, so I of course pick up because you never know. Miracles, happen. Things happen. So I always pick up if it's a New York number. So glad you caught me.
Okay, I appreciate it, man. Well, look, I'm here to listen. I'm here to learn. I'm here to hopefully leave you better than I found you, and hopefully to come up with one win-win idea for us. It doesn't have to be a project or an idea. Oh, I forgot to mention, by the way, this phone call is being recorded. Are you cool with that?
For training purposes?
Yeah, for training purposes and for potentially posting as a quote-unquote podcast purposes.
Okay. Is it currently a podcast, or is this what you're doing? You're calling like your median level celebrity friends to maybe get it on air. Is that what's happening right now?
You got me.
Who have you spoken to? Who has made the list? Who's made the cut?
You're my first call.
I'm not your first call. I'm not your first call. I've heard that my whole life, and it's never true.
You would have been my first call, but I knew you were in the weeds. I talked to Kevin McDonald. I've talked to Reed Birney, Tony Award winner. I've talked to him. We spoke for almost 2 hours on a Friday night.
Wow, Reedy will just go on. Like once you wind him up, and boom, you're off to the races.
I mean, I couldn't believe
it. You didn't have to say much in that call.
I just, boom, a few things here and there just to keep the balloon in the air. But yeah. Reed, I told him, you got stories for a lifetime.
He's got theater and Hollywood and New York stories that go back to like the early 70s. Did you talk about Gemini?
Of course, he talked about Gemini first and foremost. I mean, Gemini
Did
broke
Did you talk about how Michael J. Fox stole his career, like in the 80s?
Michael J. Fox didn't. Oh my God! My phone. 1 second. My alarm went off to call you. He didn't. But the other thing, I talked to Fred Weller, and the challenge with that was it kept cutting out every 15 minutes, so I had to call him back. So that could happen because I'm not really tech savvy. I talked to Janine Garofalo.
Oh, yeah, how was Janine Garofalo?
Oh, Janine was great. Sunday afternoon, rainy. We talked for about an hour and a half. It was great. Yeah. But I'm just going through my phone, and I'm like, look, these folks are both, I'm both a fan, and I'd like to think a friend. Sure. And can I, during this pandemic, reach out to them and say, hey, is this a bad time to talk? And build it around them when they can talk. I know you got a lot going on because I guess I kind of knew it because I saw a picture on Insta with you and Chef Ali with a baby, yes. And I was like, did he have a baby since I last saw him?
Yeah, that's right. I had a baby.
What a difference a day makes.
We took a picture with somebody else's baby, maybe.
I didn't know if it was for like a show.
Oh, I see. Right. You immediately went to like, he can't have had a baby. It must be a promotional thing he's doing. He must be like some kind of new show that he's playing. No, we literally had a baby. We actually had a real live, honest to goodness baby on March 14th, and he arrived a month early. And good for him, frankly. He did us a great service because, as you know, like if he had waited a month and he had come on his due date, which was April 12th, the whole world had turned upside down by then. So he arrived right at the edge of when the pandemic was just starting to, like, hospitals were just, everyone was just starting to wear a mask, and people were just starting to freak out a little bit, and he arrived right there. And I was one of the last people. Well, I should say, Charlie and I was allowed into the delivery room to be with her when she gave birth, and literally like 3 or 4 days later, they stopped partners from being in the delivery room with the woman giving birth. Right after that, like a couple of days after that, they stopped, and then people had to be on iPhones or iPads or whatever. So we were one of the last births at that time that was where I was actually allowed into the delivery room. So anyway, so we've been sort of in this weird place where we've kind of been experiencing this entire lockdown with an infant, and so maybe my life would have been that way. Like, I would basically have been in lockdown regardless, because when you have a new baby, you don't go out much. And so, but it's also been strange because, we're in that situation where, like, his grandparents have never met him, we've not had any people. He actually doesn't really know at this point that there are other humans in the world, except on screens. And he's never been outside, except to go to the pediatrician down the street. But, so it's an interesting sort of thing to, like, sort of bring a child into the world right now. It's a distraction and also kind of raises the anxiety somewhat,
I'm here to listen, Aasif. Well, no, it sounds like the young man has impeccable timing to come a month early, because to me, being in the delivery room when Ella was born and then Olivia were two of the greatest seminal moments of my life, to be there. Moment.
Yeah. He's really, yes, whatever, gratitude I give is for the fact that, like, he was able to do it. And we had to obviously, he was delivered, and then he came home. He was in the incubator because he was a preemie, so he was in the incubator for a few days, and then we brought him home, and then he had a little issue with his temperature and all this stuff, so they literally told us to go back to the ER. And even in those 4 days or 4 or 5 days where he had been born, and to us going back to the hospital, to the ER, the entire world had changed. We went back to Weill Cornell, and suddenly everyone was wearing masks and hazmat suits, and and it was like we walk in with this baby, and of course we're freaking out, and because we got to get to the ER with him, and the doctors were like, only one parent can go in with the child. The other parent has to literally leave the building. So my wife went in. They basically were like, you leave the building. You cannot even be in the building. So I had to leave, and I thought, well, I'll go, there's Upper East Side, New York. I'll go sit at a coffee shop. And then I start walking around, and I realized everything is closed. The entire city is shut down. There's no stores open. There's no coffee shops, no bodegas, no nothing. And so I'm just walking around. And finally I came home because there was literally nowhere to go. Are you currently in the city?
I am in an undisclosed location in the city. And where am I talking to you from? Because the people want to know. Where you're in New York City. Where are you right now?
I'm in New York. I'm in Gramercy Park area.
That's where you guys live.
That's where we live. Yes, and that's where we are. and that's where we've been. Yeah, I mean, it's been a crazy. It's been a crazy couple of months because we also moved apartments. I know that you had come by our old apartment maybe before. Maybe you didn't come up. I don't think you were invited up.
I wasn't allowed up.
You weren't allowed up, and honestly, I won't get into it now, but there were very good reasons for it at the time. But you saw the building we lived in, and that was over in Chelsea. And then in January we moved because we were having the baby, so we moved to Gramercy Park, and I'm so glad we did because we have a little bit more room here and stuff, and we had no idea that we were going to be literally locked in for the last 6 weeks or whatever that it's been. And so it's made life a little bit easier than it would have been before, at the other place.
And now I love Gramercy Park. Do you have access? Do you have a key to that park?
We're not on the park. We're not that fancy. We're not on the park, so we don't have a key to the park. We live a little south of the park. I can't reveal the actual address for, you understand, contractual reasons.
Of course.
But it's more I can't reveal the address to you. But I have revealed it to other people. But and again, nothing personal. Just if people understood, they would understand. Good reasons.
Just happy to be talking to you. Just happy to be talking to you. It's interesting. Both our children. What?
Is this a one-way conversation?
No, absolutely not.
How you're doing?
I'm doing okay, but I just wanted to say, both our children were born at Cornell Weill on 68th.
Yeah, Weill Cornell. Yeah.
Weill Cornell. It's pretty amazing. I'm hanging in. I mean, I'm doing the best I can, trying to figure out what this new world will look like for the 4 bricks and mortar spaces that I oversee, which are basically public houses, theaters, and bars and rehearsal spaces. And so this podcast, whatever you want to call it, was born out of I didn't realize how much I wanted to make something and talk to people. And I don't think in the BC world before Corona, I would have tried to let perfect get in the way of good. I would have been I'll have Aasif see if he'll come to Simple Studios, and then I'll get some of the things he likes, and then we'll do it in a room, and I want to make sure the sound is just right. And I probably would have gotten my own way and never did it. And then in the AC world, I'm like, look, I'm going to call people who I like and I know and I'd love to talk more to, and I'm going to find an app called Tape a Call, and I'm going to call them up and I'm going to talk to them, and the quality won't be great, but Alan Watts, lectures, the quality wasn't great. Krishnamurti, when you hear him, it's not crisp, but you get it. I was just get out of your own way and be willing to have your heart broken by friends who, may not, put you on a +1 somewhere, but maybe would talk to you for a few minutes. You know what I'm saying?
Again, I for your future listeners, I just, say you were always invited to our home. And you are now. You're invited now. Of course, now, I have no idea what your health situation is like, so I can't.
Well, again, who does? Who knows? I mean, I feel I can pull a deep breath, but to not know whether, it's been in you for 2 days, or, it's to me, it's I've been doing a lot of thinking about if everything has a consciousness, then this virus must have a consciousness. And what is its consciousness? Because it's changed the world in ways that, obviously, I've never even imagined possible.
Mm-hmm. It is kind of bizarre, right? It's like this thing where never in our lifetime have any of us ever dealt with something that has brought the entire world. Well, I want to say together, but you also see a tremendous amount of divisiveness. But this idea that we're used to things like this is an American problem, or it's a New York problem, or it's but this is a global thing where there's not any countries that haven't been touched by this, and it's like science fiction. It's like our species up against another species. It's literally like we are. It's like we're trying to fight the fight for humanity. So it's a kind of bizarre science fiction world that we're living in, you know?
Well, I mean, to me, it's an alien, and we always thought the alien would come from above with a lot of pomp and circumstance, with these weapons of destruction. Exactly. We thought it was Independence Day, but the aliens came from within, and us, and microscopic, and there's nobody on Earth. It's not even like not in my lifetime, not in any human's lifetime can someone say, "Oh yeah, I remember when this happened." No, you didn't. This never happened. And I do like to.
Well, the Spanish flu, I guess, was the closest thing that we have.
But is there anybody alive who can remember it?
No, not very few people.
Right. And I do like that, there is this refrain of we're all in this together, except I have 4 landlords, and I'm like, they don't seem to think we're in this together. So that's the great unknown for me will be what happens when we open and what they will demand. And we go from there.
They're still demanding the rent. They don't care if you had to close down your bricks and mortar. I'm assuming you've closed. The pit is currently closed down, right?
Yes, all 4 locations. The pit, although the pit is doing online classes now.
Right.
I'm actually teaching one Thursday night. I mean, we're just trying to do what we can. Everything now
What kind of class is that?
The class I'm teaching is the one I'm teaching Thursday night is writing for SNL, how to put together a packet for SNL and other SNL type shows, and
Are you still doing improv? How are you doing improv classes and stuff?
Well, I mean, we have people and they sign up for a Zoom class, and the classes are the people in the Zoom room and different games and exercises. But I think more than anything, it's giving people some kind of hope on the horizon, some kind of social interaction, because they're starving for social interaction. Because it's interesting. Like even the people I've spoken to, like. We talk as long as they want to talk, and but like Reed and I could have talked for another hour longer. So, but again, to me, it was like, I don't know, this was just born out of like, I've got to do this. And then I just looked at my phone and I just started, organically texting friends and seeing when, and the thing is to make them understand it's whatever works for you. You want to talk at 11 p.m., fine. You want to talk in the afternoon, whenever. I have some daddy duties that I got to do during the pandemic for homeschooling, but aside from that, I'm available. But the last time I saw you guys, it was at Win Handman's It Takes a Lunatic premiere.
That's
right. Is that correct?
That was the last time we saw each other.
Right.
And, talking of Win Handman, you probably know that he passed away. And that was a tough one, I have to say. That, for me, was, I've known quite a few people, I've known people that have passed away during this pandemic. And the Win Handman news hit me in the gut. That even though he was 97, and you think to yourself, well, dude, you had a great run at it. 97, we don't know, very few of us get to go that long. But he was completely lucid and very, there's a video of him on Facebook of him, I think, just a week before he died, where he's applauding, he's sitting by his window and clapping for the healthcare workers and telling stories and talking about, his favorite concerto by Bach and, just lucid and there, his mind, and then I think the pneumonia and the corona thing hit him fast and hard and I think he was gone pretty quickly. And for me, Win was such a sort of seminal part of my early career. He's the reason that anybody paid any attention to me at all was because of Win Handman. And, he was, initially the one who took a chance on me and said, I'm going to do your play. And while I was developing my play in my Sakina's Restaurant, I should clarify, I had a one-man show, Sakina's Restaurant. We did it at the American Place Theater in 1998. We did a revival of it in 2018 at the Minetta Lane, with the initial production, I started developing it in his class, and then he was the one that gave me the platform at his theater to come in, do your show, and he ran the show. And the amazing thing about Win is that, at that time I was a young actor. I had written the show, I developed it. I got the New York Times gave us a love letter, and I remember, it's one of the highlights of my career where I woke up that morning, got the New York Times, and there was this crazy, amazing review in the New York Times of my show, which had been open for about 2 weeks at that point. And, it was like one of those things where I was like, okay, great. This is, then the phone started ringing and people, you get that burst of recognition where people suddenly know who you are for the first time and kind of pay attention to your work in a way that they haven't before. And I remember about 4 weeks late, a couple of weeks later, so 4 weeks after we'd opened, I got an offer to be in a play at the Manhattan Theater Club, based off of all of this attention that I suddenly got. And I got a straight offer to be in Corpus Christi, which is a play about a gay Jesus that Terrence McNally, who also, by the way, succumbed to coronavirus, had written. And it was going to premiere at the Manhattan Theater Club. There was a lot of controversy around it. A lot of Christian groups were boycotting, not boycotting, but they were protesting the show about a gay Jesus. And it had great actors in it who went on, Michael C. Hall, other people, went on to do, great theater actors at the time, and that went on to do much bigger things. And I got offered this part, and my agents brought me into their office and they said, listen, you need to close your show and you need to go do this other play. And I was in a bind. I was like, oh my God, and my agents were like, listen, you got the reviews, you got the attention, you got the thing. Now you've been open for 4 weeks, close it and go do this other play that's getting written up in Time Magazine, and people are going to it's going to get all this tension. It's going to be crazy, it's going to be, it's right in the zeitgeist right now. So go do that. And I called Win, and I said, Win, my agents, they want me to close the show because they think I should go do this other play that they think is going to get bigger, going to make headlines in the paper, and because it's so controversial. And Win said, you're crazy. He basically said, you are crazy. He said, you've just gotten one of the best reviews I've ever read in the New York Times. Audiences are coming. They will continue to find the show. And we had, by the way, only a 2-month, 3-month run. That was all that was scheduled initially. And he said, the audiences will come and they will find the play, and this is your play. This is your story. This is you putting your story out in the world. What do you want to go do a play, somebody else's play, and an ensemble piece with a whole bunch of other actors where you're one of the ensemble. This is you. And I said, well, but they're saying it's going to get a lot of attention. And Win said to me, he goes, I know that play. I've read that play. He goes, it's going to close in 2 weeks. And he goes, you will run. And I said, wow. I said, what am I supposed to say to my agents? And he said, here's what I'm going to tell you. And he came and he said to me, I make you a promise. And this was in June of 1998. Or maybe early July of 1998. And he said, I will run you through January, even if I'm losing money. And he said, I'll make you that promise. You will get a run that will go all the way through January. Because I know people will come to see the show. He goes, but even if I'm losing money, I promise you that you'll run through January. And I said, okay, I'm not going to turn that down. And so I went back, and they were pissed. Manhattan Theater Club was pissed at me. My agents were like, what are you doing? This is crazy. And I said, look, I've got my own play. I'm not going to, I'm going to do this. And we did. We ran through January, and Wynn was right. Corpus Christi closed in 2 weeks to terrible reviews. And my play ran. Sakina's Restaurant kept running, ran through the fall. And by the time word got out to the South Asian community and the Indian, the larger in Queens and Long Island and New Jersey, we had busloads of people coming in from other parts of the city and other parts of New York and New Jersey and stuff. They were coming in because they heard about this play about an Indian guy, because there'd never been a play about a South Asian family before, not off Broadway, not in New York, So suddenly people were coming in from all over to see this guy who's doing this one-man show. And it went on to change my life, and my career at that time. So, yeah. So this is all to say that when Wynn passed away, it was like a big, it was a hit to the gut, like he was definitely, and he's being awarded now an Off-Broadway Lifetime Achievement Award. Because he was, one of the most seminal people in the American theater. You saw you studied with him for a while, right?
Well, yeah, I studied with him because of you. When we met at Homebody Kabul at Steppenwolf, Tony Kushner's play, directed by Frank Galati, and we became fast friends. And I asked you, I said, who should I study with in New York? I've been putting it off because I had a great teacher in Mary Ann Sebas in Chicago, and you said you got to study with Wynn Handman. And I said, okay. And I went, I auditioned for, I can't remember her name. Or maybe I auditioned for
LK. It was LK.
LK, maybe. And then I auditioned for Wynn because I had just done All My Sons, Joe Keller, in a production where they wanted to have a mixed cast of people of different colors doing All My Sons. And I did Joe Keller for him, and we workshopped it, and I was there for a bit, and then he put me in the class, and I had 2 amazing years with him. And, he's definitely one of my mentors and gurus and someone I look towards. And like you, I was saddened by the loss. It did hit me hard as well. Would you say he's someone who championed your career as much as anybody?
Yeah, this business is, you stand on the shoulders of people, and they hopefully, and he was maybe one of the first who I sort of, who put me on his shoulders and said, here, I'll give you a little leg up and you can reach a little higher because of me, So, he believed in me at the time. When I first sent out Sakina's Restaurant to the theaters in the city, and I sent out like a rough draft of the script, nobody wanted to do it. Like, everyone was just like, yeah, it's one guy, it's South Asian and all, they just didn't see the South Asian audience as a legitimate audience that they could tap into. It wasn't a theater. They didn't see it as a theater going audience. And so they didn't see the value in doing a play that for them seemed to be geared towards that audience. And Wynn, part of his sort of mantra and his was to do plays, American plays that were not of the mainstream sort of, he was doing African American plays and plays by women and stuff like that back in the 70s when he was sort of leaning into the diversity and the different storytelling. Way back when he did Leguizamo, Leguizamo was one of the first Hispanic solo performers of that when he did Mambo Mouth, and so this was his thing. Like he was like, yeah, let's do a play about a South Asian immigrant family, and let's tell that American story, which nobody else wanted to do. So he definitely took a chance on me with that, and gave me that leg up, which then actually, directly resulted in Ismail Merchant saw me in that play the night after the New York Times review came out. Ismail Merchant was in the front row, and Ismail Merchant of Merchant Ivory And then Ismail basically offered me the lead in his movie, which he was directing in Trinidad, which I ended up doing. Unfortunately, very few people saw that movie, but, you know, it was my first time starring in a film and being the lead and having to carry a movie. And, you know, so it was directly because Wynn put me and gave me that platform to put me in front of Ismail, and Ismail saw me and said, okay, this is my guy. And then, you know, and then onward and onward, you know. So, yeah.
Now, I mean, how did you find out about Wynn? What was, you know, you were my connection to Wynn Handman of how I found out, but how did you find out about him and end up auditioning to take his classes?
So I found out about Wynn Handman. So I arrived in New York City in 1991. I don't know, sometime in the winter of 1991. Spring 1991. And I was walking down 46th Street because Actors Equity used to be right there, and it still is, actually. Actors Equity used to be right there on 46th Street and Broadway. And I had gone, I think I went to pay my dues or something, and I'm walking down 46th Street towards 6th Avenue from Broadway. And I walk past this theater, and I look up, and it says the American Place Theater. And I just noticed it, and I didn't think anything of it. But immediately as I was looking at this, the front door opened, and out walked John Malkovich and Sam Shepard. And I was like, holy shit, it's fucking John Malkovich, Sam Shepard. You know, it was my first sort of celebrity sighting in New York. So I was like, whoa, that's crazy. And then, of course, I look at the theater, and I see there's a big marquee that, you know, John Malkovich is starring in Sam Shepard's new play, and they're opening here at this theater. And they must have been in the middle of rehearsal, and they must have been having a lunch break or something. And so they walk out, and I start following them down the street because I'm just like, holy shit, you know, like in Tampa, Florida, you don't get to see a lot of celebrities, you know. And so I was like, where are they going, you know? And so I followed them a couple of blocks, and then I lost them in the crowd. But I remembered that theater, the American Place Theater. Wow, that's a place where people like Malkovich work, people like Sam Shepard work there, and they're you know, big movie stars and whatever, like, you know, like, and they're doing theater in this like theater on 46th Street. Like, this must be a really exceptional place. And so it was sort of lodged in the back of my head, this idea that American Place Theater was kind of a place that I would one day like to work at. And so cut to like a few weeks later, I got a part-time job with this woman who would bake cookies and brownies, and she would sell them at intermission at the off-Broadway theaters around town. And so she would hire young actors or people who just needed, like, you know, $50 or whatever to go to like Playwrights Horizons or Primary Stages or, you know, Manhattan Theater Club or whatever, and just like set up a little thing there with cookies and cakes and biscuits and whatever, you know, and candy bar. It was mostly her baked goods, and sell them at intermission. So she hired me as one of her people, and I would do that, and I would go to playwrights. And one day she sent me to the American Place Theater, and I was in the lobby of the American Place Theater selling cookies and baked goods, and she came down to see how I was doing, and she came and she was standing next to me, and we were both standing there, and Wynn Handman walked by, and she said, oh, do you know who that is? And I said, no. And she said, that's Wynn Handman. He's the artistic director of the American Place Theater. And I said, oh, wow, that's crazy, you know. And Wynn must have been in his late 60s or something at this point. So he was a little crotchety and, like, he just seemed like a guy who was not really accessible, or, you know, I couldn't walk up to him and say hi, but he was there. And then I said, oh, you know, and then she said to me, he's also an acting teacher, and he's one of the, you know, the best acting teachers in New York City. Like, he's a legend. And I said, wow, I'd really like to study with that guy. And she said to me, no. You got to be like a professional. Like, you got to be like, you know. And she said, I mean, his roster is, you know, like Dustin Hoffman, Raul Julia, Joanne Woodward, and Richard Gere, Denzel Washington. You know, he's like, you know, like, you got to be a professional actor. He doesn't just take anybody. And I said, oh, you know, okay. So I clocked that in my mind, and I went home, and then cut to again another few weeks later. my then girlfriend, who I was living with, came home one day and she said, "Hey, I'm going to audition for this acting class." And I said, "Oh, what, because we were both looking for stuff to do." And so she said, "I'm going to audition for this acting class." I said, "What acting class?" So she said, "It's this guy named Win Hen. He has this acting class, and you have to audition for his assistant, and then if you get in, you get a call back. She goes, I'm going to audition." And I said, "Win Hen, that's the guy. That's the same guy." I said, "I want to audition for that class." And she said, "Okay, well, let's." So we called up, made the appointment, LK, blah, 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 and did the same thing you did. Auditioned for LK. She said, "Okay, come back and audition for Win." And I go back and I audition for Win. And by the way, this is all in my book, No Lands Man, available on Amazon and other places. It's great reading material during this pandemic. So some of this stuff is written in that book as well. So I go and I meet with Win, and I go into the class, and as you probably know, he had a little thing where he pulled the lights down, and then you prepare, and then he'd pull the lights up, and then you'd start the scene. And so I said to Win, I said, "Listen, he said, "What are you going to do for me?" And I said, "Well, I'm going to do," because I already been working on Sakina's Restaurant at this point. I was already writing these characters. And I said, "I have this character, and I want to do it for you, and it's an original piece that I wrote." And he said, "Oh, terrific. Great. Well, I'll put the lights down, and then I'll put the lights up. You go ahead and you begin when you're ready. And you tell me when you're ready, and you begin." So he puts the lights down, and I realized in the dark, I'm standing there, and I realized, oh, this character, the way I had written it, was he's a guy who's going to see a prostitute, and he's getting fellatio from the prostitute while he's doing this monologue. Can I say fellatio on this podcast? I can say that, right? It's fine. So he's so I said, the thing is, I have to take my pants off, because I'd always rehearsed it with, like I imagined it like this, right? I said, "I have to take my pants off." And I hear in the dark, I hear him, "What?" And I said, "In order to do the monologue, I have to take my pants off." And he said, "Oh." And so then the blue light, he used to have this blue light that used to come up. And the blue light came. I took my pants. He heard me take my pants off. And the blue light comes up, and he sort of peers into the blue light just to make sure that, I've at least got my underwear on. My boxers are still on. And so he was like, "Okay." He's like, "You're going to keep your boxers on?" And I said, Yeah. I just have to I'm going to keep my boxers on. And I think he thought, "Oh my God, this guy's going to get naked in my class, And then he turned the lights down and said, "Okay, go ahead and do it." And then I got done with the piece, and I was so excited because I'd written it, So I was like, and I said to Win, he said, "Okay, well, this is very interesting." And then I said, I remember looking at him saying, "Did you get it?" and he said, "Well, it's pretty self-explanatory." So, but he let me into his class after that, and so then the rest, then we, and then I kept developing characters with him, and ended up with the play,
And when you took the class, was it at 808 Carnegie Hall?
Yeah, it was the original on the 8th floor of Carnegie Hall, where and it was like I would go in and I would do stuff, and it was always that thing of like I would be writing stuff, and I remember I'd always I don't know if you remember, but you'd always you'd sign up, and then there'd be a chalkboard, and then everyone would come in and they would sign up, and then there'd be be like 20 people on the list, or 15 or 20, but by the time you got to the end of the day, or the end of class, by the time you got to number 15, 16, the class was 3 hours long, and sometimes it would run longer because there was just too many scenes. And so the people who had signed up or gotten there late or signed up you could sign up for whatever number you wanted to go. So the people who signed up later would end up doing their scene for 2 people, because most people would leave, and they would, because the class they would go past the 3 hours. And I always would sign up at the very end, because I was always terrified that there were going to be too many people in class when I did my scene, so I kind of wanted it to just be like 4 people, because I was the first time I would do it, I would always be writing it in the hallway, finishing writing it in the hallway right before I went in to do it, and I would always make sure that I was like, I'd walk in and be like, oh, number 17 is the last one. Okay, I'm going to go number 18. I'd write in my name. And then so I'd always be like right at the end of class, because I never wanted to. I was just so nervous, that I didn't want to do it for the full class. I just wanted to do it for like whoever was left at the end.
And who were some of the people in the class at that time that you remember who were like, you were like, wow, they are good?
Oh, there were a lot of. I mean, it was funny. Like I was in class. Well, I was in class for a long time, on and off for about 10 years with Wynn. So, I remember like Connie Britton was in class with me. She actually came after I did, but she and I originally met doing murder mysteries together, and then she, I don't know if I told her about Wynn or if she just found out about Wynn separately, but her and I were part of this murder mystery group where we go out to Long Island and like, do these murder mystery parties and stuff. And that's how I met Connie. And then we became friends. And then one day I showed up in class and she was there and she was like, I signed up for the class. And so she was in class with me. There was Lauren Graham was in class with me. She came later. Like the Kim Raver was in class. A guy named Eric Fall, who was kind of a big deal at the time. He had done a bunch. He did that movie 6 Degrees of Separation with Will Smith, and so he had sort of blown up a little bit. But, there were a lot of people who went on and just, there were other people that went on and did TV stuff, much more, recognizable on TV and stuff, or just a lot of theater actors who but there were always people popping in and stuff, and sort of, people who were older students who would come in and come back, and then I did that after a while. I would sort of go away for a month or two and then come back. And that was the great thing about Wynn's class, was that it was sort of an open door thing. Once you were in, you could always just keep coming back,
And you did scenes too as well, aside from Sakina's Restaurant, like, Spoon Rivers or.
I did do scenes. Yeah, I did. I can't remember now. Like I did a bunch of scenes. I mean, occasionally I would do. Most of the time I would work on my own stuff, and then sometimes Wynn would give me scenes to do, and then I would work with a partner. And that was always the great thing. Was it was always a place where you could. It was like a gym, It was like you went in and you just kept working on stuff, and I think that's one of the things, like I sort of, it's one of those things where I feel like it was a community, you know what I mean? Like and you probably have this a little bit with the Pit, actually, which is like that sense of like, you're always in this community with other actors, with other people who are, working on stuff, and it sort of, and I felt like I was much more, I had much more access sometimes to my spontaneity or creativity, because I was always in the flow with like other people and doing scenes. Even if it was like watching other people's scenes, or, like getting inspired by watching other people do stuff, and it helps your own work, and that kind of sort of osmosis that happens when you just watch other people, or even when you like listen to great writing, like when you watch somebody do a scene from Chekhov, or, I mean, that's how I got one of the characters in Sakina's Restaurant. I was really struggling with how to write that character. And somebody was doing a scene in class from The Seagull by Chekhov. And there was a line in The Seagull where the guy says, "A woman never forgives failure." And it clicked. And I went, boom, that's it. And then it changed my this character that I was writing for Sakina's Restaurant suddenly came out of me, and it was just like boom, and I just realized that like that was the key that I needed. Women never forgive failure. That was the mantra or the unlocked the door that allowed me to access that character and to like just write it. And I realized that was the thing. And so just stuff like that where you would, and sometimes, one of the things about like when you start working and you get more successful in this business or whatever, and you can sometimes get isolated from, because you're just in your world of, like this business becomes about like, well, I got to get that job and I got to do this because it'll lead to this, or, you know what I mean? Like, or you're trying to produce things, or you're writing things, or you're sometimes doing, and you lose that sort of kernel of just pure creativity that is the spark, and sometimes you suddenly find yourself in the business, and it's like everything is about how this, works inside the context of your business and what makes sense and what doesn't make sense. And, this is a project that's too hard to get made, so don't do that even though you really love it, or, do something that's easier, it'll get made, and producers and people and Hollywood and, that kind of stuff starts to influence your decision making, and it also gets you further and further away from your just the core creativity of the thing that Wins Class I felt like always represented for me, which was just like, it was just about the work. It was just about the work, and it was just about the creativity, and it was just about the art, and it was just about the craft. And, as you get more successful in this business, you sometimes forget that and everything gets predicated by what makes good business sense, and that's something that I found for myself that I have longed for, I want to get back to that. I want to find, get back to that community. It's an interesting thing to talk about community in this moment when we're all seeking community right now in this sort of isolated situation where everybody's like at home and, kind of like can't meet up. But like the idea, like we even see more people like getting on Zoom, and, I've never been on Zoom this much in my life, and you got hundreds of people getting on Zoom and just, trying to find that creative, that communal connection. And I realized that like, just even that starts to like, in the business of Hollywood, in the business of entertainment, like you start to like get further and further away from that, and you're suddenly like making decisions based on agents and managers and money and all those kinds of things. So Wins Class sort of represents a kind of, it's kind of nostalgic for me, like that idea that like I was just a kid, and I was just writing, and I didn't care if it was good, I didn't care if it was, I cared if it was good, but I didn't know what was I didn't have anything to like lose, there wasn't a reputation I had, or there wasn't like there was nothing to lose. I was just out there. I was just doing it, and I was trying to just create it and just make it. And if something happened, great. If something didn't happen, it was just me just exercising my creativity and just doing it and telling the story I wanted to tell. And there's something beautiful about that. I was living in a one-bedroom apartment literally living in one room in a railroad apartment in Queens at the time. I had no money. I had like $400 in the bank, and so I don't miss that part of it at all. I much prefer, having more money. But there was something about it, and trying to tap back into that. It kind of reminds me when Jerry Seinfeld like went back to stand-up clubs after Seinfeld had ended, and he made that documentary, Comedian, where he like ended up going back to like just the stand-up clubs and just getting up on a stage and just doing stand-up, and he hadn't done it in like years because he'd just been doing Seinfeld. And it's just getting back to that, and sometimes you realize like, oh, I've gotten so far away from the thing that just the little kid who wanted to be an actor, who just decided I wanted to perform. That guy is now trying to like make decisions based on like what makes business sense.
I like your analogy to a boxing gym, and I agree with that. And when I trained in a boxing gym, I remembered that you hear the same refrain over and over again. And I remember Wynn used to always say, ballast yourself in reality and then throw yourself out into the sea of inspiration. Do you remember other things in his methodology?
Good Wynn by the way.
Well, I loved him. I loved Wynn. I mean, to me, those 2 years were just like, again, very similar, a magical time. New York City, Carnegie Hall, this man, his pedigree, who had studied with him. And I felt, and, a guy who really was kind to me. But what would you say to someone who's never going to get a chance to study with Wynn in terms of his methodology and his teaching?
Well, I think that, that's an interesting question, actually. Wynn was all about process, which is what I always loved. It was never about results. It was always about, you were always in process. And he allowed the space for that. He allowed the breath for that. Like I remember him saying to an actor once, he was working on a piece, and he wasn't getting it. And he said, you know what? We're not going to work on this anymore. And the actor was kind of, crestfallen because he was like, what do you mean? You're giving up on me, And Wynn said, no, I just think right now I want you to go work on some other stuff. Like I want us to work on other scenes and other playwrights and then we'll come back to this in a year from now or 6 months from now, and I think you'll have a better handle on it. And so it was all about, and I remember thinking to myself, wow, that's an amazing way to sort of approach something rather than like hammering away at it and being like, you can get it, just keep doing it. He was basically like, yeah, just take your foot off the gas for a second here. Let's just go, let's pivot, let's go in a different direction, let's try this over here, maybe go do something. This was like a period piece. Maybe we do something contemporary. We do something like, and we work our way back to this, And I think that was an incredible, he was a generous teacher, he like really took you for where you were at and sort of molded you from the place that you were at and what your gifts were as an actor. It wasn't a cookie cutter kind of thing. It wasn't like one size fits all with Wynn. It was like, he saw who you were. He saw what your gifts were. He saw like, oh, this is where you are strong. You're, you look, I don't know, like Ali, you're funny. Is there a way for this character to have your humor in there? Like, it doesn't have to, even though it's not a comedy, maybe there is, and I remember there was one actress in class who was a dancer, and she was just very physical because she was a dancer, and that's what she was trained at. And so every time he would work with her, he would always just encourage her to use her physicality because it was her strength. And he was like, go into your physicality, go, use your, like even if it's not a necessarily physical piece in that way, he would encourage actors to use what they had. And remember, he used to do an exercise with sometimes actors who had English as a second language, like a lot of people in class who maybe spoke German as their first language or Swedish or Hungarian or whatever. And he would have actors do the scene in their native tongue, which I had never seen before. He would basically say like, okay, your native tongue is German. So here we're doing the scene from All My Sons or Glass Menagerie or whatever it is. Do it in German. Just say all your lines in and it would allow actors to access a part of their brain that they were not accessing because they were speaking a language that wasn't the language they spoke as a child, So like with you, I don't know, did you ever speak Farsi? I don't know if you did, but, he might have said that to you. He might have said, okay, do it in Farsi. Just speak, do the whole scene. And he did that with me, I think once or twice. And I remember, I was just like, oh yeah, it allows me. It just drops you into a different place. There's a different, something happens in your brain where you're suddenly accessing emotions from a different, almost like coming through a different door in the house that you've never come through before, And suddenly you see the house from a different perspective because you always come through the front door, but then you come through the side door and you go, oh, wait a minute, there's a kitchen right here. You know, it's like this weird sort of thing where you suddenly see it from a different perspective. And so, you know, like there were things like that. Like he had these amazing song exercises where he would like have you come in and do a song, but you would speak it. And you would do it as a monologue. So, you know, if you literally say the lines of the song, the lyrics of the song, you know, it'd be like, love me tender, love me true. You know, like it was literally like, and it was in relation to, again, dropping down into an emotional truth that you could find in song lyrics, because sometimes song lyrics are so, they're poetry, you know, they're just so raw, and there's no subtext. Like songs just say, I love you, you know, just say it, you know. And so you drop down sometimes into these emotions that you needed to find for your character. So he was a guy who I always felt very much was like a guy about process and about scene work. He also did a lot of stuff about scene work, which is, it wasn't, you know, in a lot of acting classes, you'll come in, you'll do a scene from a play, and then you'll move on. And you'll do a scene from another play, or you'll do a monologue or whatever. And with Win, it wasn't like that. With Win, it was like you would work on a role, and you would work on it from beginning to end. So you would, if you were going to do Tom in Glass Menagerie, you were going to come in and you were going to do Tom's first scene. And then you would get that, and then you would do the second scene, and the third. And so by the time a few months had gone by, or 6 months, you had worked on that role as if you had done that play. And that was a very unique way that Win also worked. He didn't just work on scenes, he worked on character and helping you find character and really marinating, is a word he used to love to use, you know, marinate in the character and let it sort of and agitate from the essence, which is another great phrase of Win's, where you find the essence of the character, what his true essence is, and then let everything agitate from that singular essence. Or sometimes it's not singular, sometimes it's a couple of things, but you know what I mean, like that same thing of so yeah, I mean, there were many things that over the course of the time that I studied with him, that, you know, you would sort of go, like, that I still carry with me today, like, you know, the song exercise, or, you know, other things that I will still try to use sometimes, you know, in my own work.
Now, do you teach, and would you ever consider teaching?
I mean, I've never considered it. You know, who knows what's going to happen in the, as you call it, the AC world, you know. But I've never considered teaching. I've never thought of myself as a teacher. And maybe I think teaching sort of intimidates me a little bit, because I'm much more a person who is more comfortable bouncing off of other people. Like, I'm much more comfortable, like, in an interview setting, or like talking about stuff, or like bouncing off of somebody else. But just standing up there in front of a group of people and just imparting knowledge to them, or I mean, maybe if I really like would structure it, I guess you know, I could do it. I've never thought of it as something that I would want to do. It probably would be a great exercise, though. Just you know, the question also comes up: what would I teach? You know, I like. You talking about like acting or something like that?
Yeah, acting like a Win type scene study class.
Like chemistry.
No, well, I mean, I don't. You know, I mean, I don't know how good your chemistry is, or physics, but no, like a Win type acting class.
Yeah, no, I mean, I have friends actually who have gone on to become teachers themselves and teach acting classes, who are former Win students, and I mean, I never have. I mean, I've been very fortunate also in this business that I've been working, and so that's been great. But sometimes it you know, I might be open to coming in as a guest teacher, just, if I was to go. I think it intimidates me a little bit, so I probably need to examine that in myself. Like, what about it really intimidates one? That the idea of, like, I'm imparting, that I have anything to teach. Because teaching is like, well, I mean, look, I'm a storyteller, and I love telling stories, and I love, like, sort of teaching through that, and maybe there's a way to do that as well. But it feels like you need to know you need to be very clear about what you're talking about when you're a teacher, and you need to know what you're imparting. And maybe you don't. Maybe I'm making that up, but that's my feeling about it.
Well, prior to the virus in the BC world, I was working on these shows called Free People of Color. So I had an all African American cast, and I had an all South Asian cast. I'm sure they would, if in the AC world, would love to have you come in for a session just to work with them. But
sure.
If Win is in that class, in that moment in time where you're walking down the street and you see Shepard and Malkovich, is a bifurcation point in your life, a seminal moment. Are there others you can point to prior to that, of teachers or a play or something happened or you saw someone where you began to, in the crucible of life, see like, oh, I can do this. I enjoy getting up in front of people. Someone laughed in a play that I did. Are there moments like that? Oh,
yeah. I mean, going all the way back to childhood, when I was a little kid, I don't want to say I was like 11 years old, and maybe a little older, maybe 13 or 14 or something. But anyway, I saw this movie that came on TV at Christmas time. And the movie, for those of you who are old enough might remember, it was called Bugsy Malone. Do you remember that movie?
Yes.
Bugsy Malone. Young Scott Baio, a young Jodie Foster. And I saw that movie, and it was just these kids, and they were all around my age, maybe a little bit older than me, and they were like, it was a gangster movie, but they were all like shooting pies in each other's faces, and I just thought to myself, this is amazing. With these, you get to do that? Like, you can do that? And I just thought, I grew up in like an immigrant family. My father worked in the store. My mother, was a housewife, but she also helped my dad in his store. And my parents worked hard, and they never seemed really happy with their life. And they were, and I was watching this thing where I was like, oh, you can spend your life, you could like make a life out of just playing. And I was like, that seems like a lot more fun than standing behind a shop counter or, struggling to make ends, like whatever. Like I was like, I'd much rather play. Like I'd much rather just like have fun. And it just seemed like these kids were having fun. It just seemed like the coolest thing. And at that moment I was like, well, I want to be an actor. I want to play. I want to like tell stories, and I think it found me in that moment, like whatever it was that needed to like chakra that needed to open, it opened in that moment. And suddenly I was like, oh, that's what I want to do. And so that was probably the singular first moment when I was like, boom, I want to do that. And then I went ahead and joined like a local children's theater group, and I would go there every Wednesday night. We'd do improv games, and we would like, do little scenes from plays and da-da-da, and like play games. And it was, and I started writing, and I started writing sketches and plays and stuff. And that was it. That was the moment when I think I first sort of went, there's that thing in storytelling where the object goes from being completely stationary to movement. And that's the beginning of the story, right? The story starts with a Coke can sitting on a desk, and then the Coke can tips over, and that's your moment of drama. That's the moment of drama or tension. And that was it for me. That was like the moment when it went boom. I was suddenly awake, and I was like, okay, now I want to do this. This is what I want to do. I want to do it. And I'm going to go to this thing. Starts in, and then I was suddenly like, that was my thing. You know, then I was like a theater nerd from then on, you know. And so it was like, that was probably initially the most sort of seminal moment for me in terms of, and then, you know, obviously I went, you know, high school, you know, we moved to America. And in America, when we came to America, you know, my mom said to me in high school, you know, we'd come to this American high school, and we came from England, and there was no theater offered in my private school in England. You know, there was like my school that I went to. It wasn't even a course. So I came to America not even realizing that there was such a thing as theater. Like you couldn't, like you could do that as, you know, I could do that outside of school or whatever, but in school, like the idea that there would be theater class or drama class was completely like, I didn't even think about that. So I immediately signed up for art because I thought, oh, art, that's something I like, you know, I'll draw and stuff, you know. And my mom was the one who said, well, wait a minute, why did you not sign up for drama? And I was like, what do you mean? She was like, well, there's drama. And I was like, oh, there is? She was like, yeah, you like acting. Why are you signed up for art? And I was like, oh. And so then we went back, told the school, like, he doesn't want to do art, he wants to do drama. And then I was in drama class. And it was like a whole new world for me because I was like, oh, this is, again, like, you get to do this, like, you know, like this is it was again going back to what I was saying before, like it was the moment of creativity, the moment when sort of the percolation of whatever it is that you want to create in life, you know, and the stories you want to tell, and you just know that thing of like, I mean, you probably experienced this as well, like I'm sure that Reedy has, and everybody, you know, like that thing of like, oh, I like the experience of being up here. There are many people that don't like it. Like my wife does not like it, you know? Like I like it. I like that experience of being up here and having people and telling stories and inhabiting character and telling and people laughing or people applauding or whatever that is. I like that feeling. And it's a very particular thing. And it's like, oh, this is my drug. This is the thing, you know, that I'm gonna do. And then, you know, and it's amazing because, like, my wife does not like that feeling at all. Like, she likes giving speeches and being smart and sort of, you know, she does not like sort of making a fool of herself. Whereas I love making a fool of myself, you know, as do you. And so I think that's the thing, you know.
That class in England when you were 14, but how did you find out about it? Who told you? How did you look it up? How did you know to find a Wednesday night kids acting class?
Well, what happened was I said to my mom, I said, I want to be an actor. And my mom said, okay. And she thought, well, this is crazy. Like, obviously, you know, great. And I think she was kind of just placating me. And she said, well, if you want to be an actor, and this was before the internet, before all that, right? So it was like 70s. And so she said, if you want to be an actor, then you should look at some kind of like local program where they maybe teach acting or, you know, like you can go and do. She didn't know. She was making it up. She was just like, go do some research into that and figure out what to do. And so I went to the library. I got on the bus. I went down to like city center of Bradford where we lived. I went to the local public library and I said to them, I want to find out if there are any acting classes or places around Bradford in the area. Do you have a list of those kinds of things? Maybe my mom said to me, like, go to the library and you'll find this stuff. And I said, I want a library. And they said, yeah, over here we have some stuff. You can look through it. And we have names and addresses of local theater companies in the metropolitan area. And so I basically sat there in the library and I wrote down the names and addresses of all the local theater companies. There's Bradford Playhouse and this theater company and this other children, and there was one company called the Brighouse Children's Theater, and the Brighouse was a town, was about 10 miles, less than 10 miles, 5 miles away, and it was just the next town over, and it was called the Brighouse Children's Theater, and I thought, oh, I'm a child, this is perfect, and so I wrote them down. I wrote down a few others. It was like maybe came home with like half a dozen names of different theaters in the town, and then I wrote letters to them, and I wrote letters to dear blah blah blah, to whom it may concern. My mom helped me write the letters. I wrote these letters and I said, listen, I want to be part of your theater company. I don't know. I'm only 14 years old. I don't know what that means, you know, if I can or whatever, like, but this is what I want to do. And nobody wrote back to me. And the only place that wrote back to me was the Brighouse Children's Theater. And they said, we've never gotten a letter before, but this is really great that you wrote us this letter. We're doing a play right now. You should come and see the play, and then if you want to come backstage and meet the actors and meet the people involved, and then I went. My dad took me to see the play. I went to see the play. I went backstage, and and I just was like, oh, this is amazing. And I met with the people, and they said, look, there's a Wednesday night. Every Wednesday night we do classes. We play improv games and we do other things. And so you should just come down on Wednesday night. And so that's how it started. And then I just started going there. And, and part of it was also that, like, I was 14. So I was, like, in that stage where I was, like, also, like, I went to see this play, and there were these cute girls in it. And, and I was just like, oh, my God, it's, like, hot girls here and stuff, And so part of it was that as well. Like, I was like, oh, man, like, all these, like, I also had just come, I was in an all-boys school, so I never got to see girls. And so it was, like, kind of fun. Like, I was like, oh, these girls, they're all playing together and doing plays together and stuff, and I'll get to meet, So there's part of it was that. It was like, but it's also, like, just the love of the thing. And then I started going to these Wednesday night classes, and then that was it.
And then when your parents moved to Tampa, and you did this in high school, and then you went to school in Florida, and then how did that lead to you working at Disney in their parks?
So I auditioned again. I was in college. I was a theater major at University of South Florida. I was in the University, and then I basically went. So a bunch of us realized that they were opening. Oh no, so it was in the paper. Like they were opening the Disney MGM Studios in Orlando, Florida. And this was 1989. And they were like, the Disney MGM Studios, and they're looking for theme park, looking for talent. So things like, everybody from like, and often Disney would hire like dancers and singers and, for their stage shows and whatever. But they were also looking for actors because they have this whole improvisational comedy troupe that they were putting together, and it was basically just like, it was called Streetmosphere, and it was basically like an improv comedy troupe, and they wanted people who had improv comedy theater training, and and so we were all, a bunch of friends of mine, we were all like, let's go to Orlando and let's audition, because we were all like in our last year of school, and we're like, let's audition and see what happens. So we all drove out there. We all drove to Orlando, and it was a cattle call. It was a total, like, hundreds of people, and went in there, and I did a monologue by Eric Bogosian from his play Drinking in America, which is about a fry cook that I had done in class at USF, like in one of our scene study classes. I had done this monologue that the teacher had assigned me, and it was basically just like this fry cook in a like a greasy spoon, and he was basically just like, you want French fries? Hamburger. It was kind of like that Belushi sketch on SNL. But I did it for them, and they loved it, and they hired me to be as part of this Streetmosphere troupe, which was, I think at the time, started off like maybe like 30 of us, and we all sort of were this kind of improvisational comedy, very loose sort of theater troupe, but we would basically play characters and inhabit this kind of fictional world that was supposed to be Hollywood in the 1930s. When you walked into MGM, there was like everyone was dressed like 1930s clothing, and we all spoke in like sort of, like where are you going? Say, see you there. And it was like that kind of James Cagney sort of talking, and it was just that. It was like, and it was just a blast, And so I did that, moved to Orlando, and started working at Disney, and actually learned a lot. That was actually a great initial training ground, just in terms of improv and in terms of comedy. It was just one of those things where working with people who are really quick, really funny, people like Mo Collins and Paul Vogt, who went on to be on Mad TV, and just like it was like a real hotbed of like sort of people who had come from like Dudley Riggs, or they had come from like Renaissance fairs, and that sort of feeling. So there was a lot of cross-pollination of different types of actors. You had like sort of like your improv comedy people, you had your straight theater people, and the sort of pairing of all of that. You had actors who were like come from like, legitimate theater, like working at Seattle Rep, and like, and then people who were just basically like Ren Fair people. So it was kind of great, and it was just like this moment when we were all like in our 20s, and we were all just sort of trying to figure out our careers and stuff, and we just had a blast, for a year or so at Disney and at MGM, and just kind of worked. And it was also like this moment when MGM had just opened in '89, so it was brand new, and so there was all this press and publicity and da-da-da. And at that point you're like, I've made it, I've arrived, I'm making $400 a week. This is awesome, and so. It was kind of a great time,
And Mo Collins was actually, and Paul Vogt were in your cast?
Yeah. That's how I know. I know Mo and Paul because they were in our original cast of Street Mo, and they went on to be on Mad TV later on, but they were, and they had come right out of improv and that world, and so. It was kind of great because you saw all this emerging talent, like all these people who like 10 years later were going to end up being on TV and doing different stuff, But even then I was like, Mo is a genius. Like Mo was out of, everybody in that troupe, I think she was a standout. Like you saw it right there. You were like, oh, she's doing characters. But then, then she made famous on Mad TV. But like, she has an ability to sort of drop into characters that she was doing that were just absurd and funny and kind of sometimes almost not human, but clearly human. But she was and is still today incredibly talented. But I remember like watching her at that time and being like, oh shit, like that's some serious chops right there. That's some serious comedy character. She would just move her body in a way and something just become like an old lady or whatever it was that she was playing. She had this character that she did. There was a thing that they had called the Everything Truck, and the Everything Truck was the Hollywood they were kind of like the Con Edison of 1930s Hollywood. Like they would fix, not Con Edison. They were more like the guys who would like just fix stuff on the street. Like like if a lamp post fell down or the road needed fixing, and they were called the Everything Truck, and they would just fix everything and anything. And they'd ride around in this sort of like weird Ghostbusters looking car that they would drive down the street, and Mo. And they each had there were 5 of them, and each had distinct sort of personalities and characters. But Mo created this character that to this day, I don't think anybody could tell you whether it was male or female. Like, it was just this weird sort of grumpy old man, but also could be a woman, but I never really confessed to being either, you know. But it was just genius, and just you know, you just saw like the aptitude for physical comedy, and how quick and everybody, you know, even Paul and his twin brother Peter, and you know, this guy named Joe Wesson who was also in the Everything Truck, who had literally come from Barnum and Bailey. Like, he'd come from from Ringling Brothers. Like, he was a clown, full on like circus clown, and he would do stuff where you were just like, holy shit, like that's, you know. So it was this kind of cross pollination of talents from different performance genres, all sort of clashing together in this troupe, you know.
And then from there, you decided to go. What made you take the leap of faith to go to New York City from then? I mean, you know, out of all the cities from Florida, you know, there's Chicago, there's Los Angeles. What made you say, all right, I'm going to New York? Because it probably came sometime after that.
It came, well, so I started dating a girl out of the theme park thing. And I went from Disney, and then I got a job at Universal Studios down the street when they opened, and I was sort of doing stuff there, doing one of their shows. And then this woman that I had been dating at the time said, I'm out of here. I'm moving to New York, and I got to go. And I said, oh, it was just as simple as that. I was like, well, I'll come too. And she was like, really? And I was like, yeah. And, you know, what was going to be like a conversation of like, oh, I don't know, I got to move to New York, maybe we can't do this anymore, like, became like, we're both going to New York. And so I basically, at that point, just packed up my stuff and told my parents, who were in Tampa, and I was like, I'm moving to New York with my girlfriend, and we're going to basically just figure it out. And so I came, and so she moved here, and then I was doing a show at the Oslo Theater Company, like a children's show. And then once that was done, I moved up a few months later and met her, and we basically ended up, you know, living out in Queens, in Long Island City, and just started hustling. Just started going to Actors Equity at 5 or 6 o'clock in the morning to audition for like Pippin. It's like some regional theater somewhere, and do these open calls, these Actors Equity open calls, and you'd stand in line outside the street and get your bagel. You know, it was kind of, an innocent time. Like, you get your bagel and your coffee, and you'd go into the city, and you'd stand in line with like 500 other actors, and you get your number, and you'd go get lunch, and then you come back, you know. And then you get your call time, and you go in. Like 1 o'clock or 2 o'clock in the afternoon, and you go in and you do your 16 bars of a song and your monologue, and then they'd be like, thank you very much. And that was it. That was the first few years of being an actor in New York, you know, just trying to, that was it. And then you wait tables, or in her case, she was waiting tables, and I couldn't get a job as a waiter, and so I would bus tables. Because immediately I would walk into a restaurant, they'd see the brown face, and they'd be like, you're a busboy. And so, and I had no waiting experience. I had a little bit of waiting experience, but like not very much. And so I used to bus tables at this place called Michael's Restaurant on 55th Street and 6th Avenue, between 5th and 6th Avenue. And it was this very upscale place, and I was a busboy there. And that's what I did, and I did that, and I cater waitered for a number of years, and sort of just tried to figure out, you know, and occasionally do like a guest spot on Law and Order or something, you know.
Michael's, the restaurant that was like, it's a place where a lot of people from the news go.
Yeah, it was actually crazy.
I just went to their 30th anniversary party.
You did?
Yeah, a friend of mine is good friends with Michael, and his name is Alex Young, and he invited me as his +1 to come to the 30th anniversary party of Michael's, which is, you know, for those people who know New York, it's a place to be seen in the news world where people have, you know, standing, you know, tables.
Yeah, it's so crazy because I had no idea. I got this job, Michael's Restaurant. I was a busboy, and every day it would be like, what's his name? The guy from NBC News. The guy who's he was the anchor for many years. Brokaw. Tom Brokaw would come in. I get his radicchio salad every like couple of days. Brokaw would come in there. Sam Donaldson would come in there. Rather would come in. You know, Spike Lee came in one time. But it was kind of a celebrity hangout, but it was also very news skewed. I recall now it was a lot of like, I remember Brokaw coming in. He was a regular. But Donaldson and Rather came in a few times as well. So yeah, I that was my first sort of New York restaurant gig. I was a busboy there.
And when did you start getting acting gigs where you kind of left that world of the side job?
Well, I was doing a lot of tater waitering for a while, and I was doing a lot of I'm trying to think. Like, I think I started getting like the occasional, like I got an agent because I did actually, funnily enough, I did a scene night thing. You know, we used to do these. I don't know if the people do them anymore. But we used to do these things where you do like a scene night. You get a bunch of actors from acting class together, and you'd all do like a scene. And you'd invite agents and casting people, and it's just basically just an evening of scene work from plays. And actually, I did a scene with Connie Britton, and Connie and I. This was before Connie became Connie Britton, you know, Brothers McMullen, Connie Britton. And I remember her at the time. We did this scene, and she was telling me at the time. She was like, "Yeah, I just did this little movie with Ed Burns. This guy Ed Burns. I don't know. I don't know how it's any good, but let's see. You know, hopefully it sort of people see it." She's like, "It's really low budget. It's like this kind of thing." I was like, "Oh, good luck with that. That sounds, you know." But I'm obviously thinking like, "Yeah, that's going to go nowhere." You know. She was like, "This guy Ed Burns. He wrote it. He's about these Irish brothers that live in Long Island." And, you know, I was like, "Oh, sounds okay." You know, sounds like no one's going to see it. And then, of course, you know, cut to a couple of years later, like, boom. But before that, Connie and I ended up doing this scene night together, where we had a bunch of us do different, and I got an agent through that. And then once I got an agent, then they started sending me out for stuff and sort of sending me for auditions and stuff like that. And then I started getting like, you know, the occasional commercial or like, you know, like, I think it was probably just like maybe a guest spot on one. Or actually, no, wait. The first thing I got, the first legit thing that I got was Die Hard 3. Also known as Die Hard with a Vengeance. And it was in 1994, and I got the first on-camera, like, TV movie thing I got. Before that, I ended up doing Suburbia with our friend Firdaus Bamji, and written by Eric Bogosian, and it was at Lincoln Center, and I was Firdaus's understudy in this play, which was probably, like, at the time, the cast was like Martha Plimpton and Zach Orth and Steve Zahn and Josh Hamilton, Tim Guinea, and it was kind of a big deal. Like, this play, you know, Wendy Hoops. It was just you know, and Firdaus was in it, and there was this Pakistani character that Bogosian had written in this play, and Firdaus got that part, and I understudied him. And it was crazy because at the time, like, this play was kind of, you know, Bogosian had just come off of like the movie with Liev that he had done, the one about the radio DJ. You know what I'm talking about?
Talk Radio.
Talk Radio. He had just done Talk Radio, so he was kind of a big deal. And then suddenly, like, we had, you know, and Robert Falls from Chicago, he directed this play, and you know, we had Ethan Hawke was coming every other night, and like Madonna came to see it, and Tom Cruise was in the audience, and it was kind of like my first experience of like New York theater, and like, holy shit, like Tom Cruise is sitting in the second row, you know? And while I was understudying that play, I got this part in Die Hard 3, and it was a nothing part. It was like literally one line that I was doing with Bruce Willis and Sam Jackson, and I basically, if you watch the movie today, you'll see it's like they steal my cab. The cab that they drive through Central Park in is my cab that they steal on 72nd Street. And it was literally just like this one, oh, what are you doing, blah, 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 screaming, and the guys take my cab, sorry, Popo, and I'm like, you bastard, you know, and that was it. I had done one line on Miami Vice years before when I was in Florida. That's how I got my SAG card. But this was like my first thing in New York, like a movie type thing. And I remember asking for the day off from Lincoln Center because I had to go and shoot this thing up the street, you know, and they were like, yeah, it's fine. And I remember my agents being like, listen, it's his first ever like movie thing. You got to let him go do it, you know. And Firdaus was like, yeah, I'm fine, so you can go, you know. Like, and I went and shot that. That was like my first real sort of on-camera thing, and it was during when I was understudying in Suburbia at Lincoln Center.
Wow. I mean, there's so much. I want to ask a few more things in terms of like, because our paths crossed at Homebody Cobble in Chicago, and to me, that was a magical, seminal summer in my life. A testament being that I can call someone like Aasif Mandvi and talk to him like a friend, I'd like to think. But how did that's still almost a decade from Die Hard with a Vengeance? You know, because we met in 2003 in May.
2003 was Homebody Cobble, yeah.
Right. So, I mean, what's happening, you know, in a bullet point kind of way from Die Hard with a Vengeance till you end up auditioning for Homebody Cobble and getting it?
So I did Sakina's Restaurant in the meantime. Win Handman, all the stuff we talked about, like auditioning for his class, getting in there, doing like guest spots on Law and Order, doing the play. I had done, by that time I had done Mystic Masseur with Ismail Merchant. I'd gone to Trinidad, done that movie. And then, and that was in 2001. I'd been on Broadway before that. I had done Oklahoma on Broadway, which was in 2002. And so I had been, you know, working for like the last decade or so, and I remember getting Homebody Cobble. I'm not that Chicago production. I'm actually not sure how I got it. I must have auditioned for it. I think I did. I think I auditioned for Frank Galati, and in New York, and came out to Chicago to do that in the summer of 2003, and that's when we all met. It was me and you and Firdaus and Aryan Moyad and Omar Metwali and Reed Birney, the famous Reed Birney, and Tracy Letts. You know, Tracy Letts and I shared a dressing room together, and that was an experience because Tracy played, for those of you who may or may not have ever seen Homebody Cobble, Tracy played this very sort of this heroin addict who's also kind of a sex addict and just kind of a really fucked up character. And so he would have all these like he'd have weird pictures of like girls in bikinis on his dressing room mirror and stuff, and which is nothing compared to Steve Zahn when we were doing suburbia. He just had straight up pornography like all over his mirror in his dressing room to inspire him to get into character. But Tracy and I would sing this song every night before the show, which was our warm-up song. And the song was, I don't know how profane I can be on your podcast, but it was, who doesn't like fucking? Who doesn't like working it? And that was our warm-up song every night before we went on stage. It was really his warm-up song because I played a Taliban mullah, so like the fact that the Taliban mullah would be singing "Who doesn't like fucking," maybe it would work. I don't know, but I just think I joined in just to give him company. But it was a crazy time. It was we all got to know each other at that time, and that play, I think. I remember the story of you having real a conflict over a word that you had to say, coracoid versus conocoid or something, that you had real difficulty with, which is for another podcast. But it was, I mean, and then we'd get together every night and we'd hang out, and you would go and take baths in the middle of like us like hanging out. I remember that, like we'd all be like sitting on the sofa in like Reedy's apartment or Firdows's apartment and drinking and maybe other things, and then you would suddenly say like, I have to go take a shower, and we'd all be like, okay, and then Ali would just get up, go in the other room, take a shower, full on take a shower, come back 45 minutes later, showered and clean. You smelled great, but with a bathrobe on. So you would
could have been
like Firdows's bathroom.
Could have been cramp issues. One thing you mentioned earlier with Mo Collins is that you just really sensed she had the chops, right? Are there other people who you stood across or acted opposite where you also had that feeling of like, whoa, I am running with wolves. This person is good.
Yeah, I mean, a lot of those, I think that when I got to The Daily Show years later, working with people like John Oliver, or Samantha Bee, people like that, where you kind of go like, oh yeah, these guys, are fucking talented, like these guys know what they're doing, and I'll tell you one guy who I worked with opposite, who I was like, how did this guy get this successful, was De Niro. And I said, I worked with him on a movie called Analyze This, and I remember like going in and being like, I know my lines, I know them. I was so nervous working with De Niro and Robert De Niro, who I have the utmost respect for, and obviously like, he doesn't give a shit what I say about him, but I remember like De Niro, it was the first day of shooting, and De Niro did not know his lines. And I was like, seriously? Robert De Niro does not know his lines right now? And I was like, I had been so nervous, and I had like learned all my lines. I was like so like in the thing, and I was like, I'm working with De Niro. It's going to be insane. Like, he's going to be so prepared. And he just was like, now who am I playing? Like, what is this now? What is this thing? What's happening? What's happening? Like, my character's name is, okay, got it. Okay. And I was like, oh yeah. I was like, this guy. But then I also realized like, oh, okay, there's that. There's the truth of that moment. There's like him being so like in the moment right now and allowing whatever it is, the inspiration of the moment, and not preparing to the point of like where you're, killing whatever spontaneity is inside of you. That was also true. And so that was an interesting lesson. But yeah, I did. I worked with, I'm trying to think like, over the years, like, I think Patrick Wilson, when I worked with him in Oklahoma, I knew he was going to be a big deal. Shuler Hensley, another guy from Oklahoma, I was like, this guy's fucking talented, So many people over the years.
The other the things that I just want to touch on, are the Daily Show, which is, again, iconic, and one of those things where people will always look back on the Daily Show correspondence, especially during your era, as something. And then you just kind of, in a way, twice mentioned, but in kind of passing, a Merchant Ivory film, Mystic Monsieur. It's a Merchant Ivory film. So, I mean, those two things I'd love to touch on a little bit about. You told me how the Merchant Ivory film happened. He came to see you in Sakina's restaurant, and from there it happened. The Daily Show, how did that come about? Where all of a sudden, you've done a lot of comedy, you've done a lot of improv, but all of a sudden you're a correspondent on the Daily Show.
That was crazy. I mean, again, I've been very fortunate in my career that I have, the unexpected, like this thing just happened and I just went down this path and I didn't know where it was going to go, but lo and behold, and so I've had a career that sort of I've gotten to do a lot of different kinds of things, which I've been really happy and fortunate about. But the way the Daily Show happened was literally I got a call from my manager saying, you have an audition for the Daily Show. And they were looking for a one-off correspondent to come in and be like a Middle East correspondent from the Middle East, like it was reporting from the Middle East. And they were looking for like a guy to come in one time, just do this one spot, and that's it. And they were auditioning people, and I think my manager called and said, look, you have this audition for the Daily Show, and do you want to go? And I remember like I was writing you and I actually were hanging out a little bit at this time when this all went down, I think, because I had just gone through a breakup with a girlfriend of mine that was kind of heartbreaking at the time. And I remember I was coming to your office over at the Pit, and you and I were working on a project, and then I would like talk about my heartbreak, and you were operating a little bit as a therapist for me. And I remember I was writing a letter to her, one of these, like, oh my God, I just found out she got engaged, and I was kind of in this slump and, this real depressed place. And then I get this call, the Daily Show, you have an audition, you want to go down there? And I was like, shit, can I go tomorrow? I was like, I'm not feeling great today. I'm writing this letter, how long? And then the manager called back. He said, no, they're seeing people till 3 o'clock. If you can't get there by 3 o'clock, forget about it. We'll move on. And I thought, okay, fuck, I should do this. So I put on a suit and tie, went down to the Daily Show, which was actually I was living on 72nd Street at the time. I went down to 53rd and whatever it is, 53rd and West Side Highway, 10th Avenue. And so I go in and they said, here's the copy, here's the stuff you'll be doing, the sides. It's like all this material. I start trying to remember, And then the girl came out and she was like, you ready? And I said, look, I was like, I need a few more minutes. There's a lot of material, I'm trying to memorize it. And she was like, oh, no, it's on the teleprompter. And I remember this feeling of I was like, what? Teleprompter? I was like, oh my God. I was like, and I was like, oh, I'm going to fucking, fine, great. And I just threw the script aside and I went in, and I had a kind of bravado about me that I don't think I really deserve to have, because A, I thought I'm never going to get this job. And B, I was like, I'm a serious actor. I've done Broadway. I've done Mystic Monsieur with Ismail Merchant Ivory. I was like, I'm not doing this. This is going to be, and I thought, well, whatever. It's I need the few $100 or whatever it's going to pay me, for this gig. So I remember that it was Jon Stewart. I walk in and I meet him, and then a couple, he says to me, he says, now listen, have you ever performed because we do our taping in front of a live audience. I don't know, if you ever performed in front of a live audience before. And I said, I remember looking at him and I was like, I've been on Broadway. And he was like, oh, okay, all right, Mr. Broadway. And then we did it. And I read the thing off the teleprompter. And I really just I didn't know what to do. So I just did a Stephen Colbert impression. I basically just cocked my eyebrow, kind of had a little bit of an arrogant, sort of take on it, and just did it, not expecting anything really. And then we got done, and John turned to me and he said, "Congratulations, you got the part. Welcome to the Daily Show. You'll be on tonight." And I was like, "What?" And at that point, it was just a one-off gig. But of course, he called my manager and signed the contract. And then he's like, "We're going to tape, rehearse, 3:00. We tape at 6. You good? You good?" And I was like, "Yeah, sure." And we taped, and then it was on that night. And then the next day, well, everybody saw it, and people were calling me like, "Dude, I just saw this guy on the Daily Show. It looks just like you," And I was like, "Yeah," because I didn't have time to tell anyone. And the next day, John calls me and says, actually that night, he said to me, he goes, "I really like you, man." He's like, "I think you're good." He's like, "I'd like to have you back if you're available." And I was like, "Yeah." So then they just call. They just be like, "Listen, come on back. We got another piece, And I just go in every now and then and just do a piece for them. And then around that, about 3 or 4 months later, John called me into his office and said, "Look, we'd like to offer you a permanent gig here and make you a full-time Daily Show correspondent." And that was in 2007. And that was a crazy time to be on the Daily Show because, it was like you said, it was like me, Oliver, Sam, Jason Jones, Wyatt Cenac. I think Wyatt actually showed up a little bit later. Caudry had just left. It was the next wave after the Carells and the Colberts and the Caudrys and all that. So yeah, it was a crazy time. And then next year, the year later, Obama got elected, and we went to the Democratic National Convention, and it was all just like there was so much happening in the world in terms of there was the Iraq War, there was Bush, there was all of that going on, and then Obama gets elected, and the whole country went fucking ape shit, and and so it was like this crazy time to be on that show, at that moment when Obama got elected, But then I was there till 2014, and some of the best, got to work with some of the funniest, most talented people in the business, writers, performers, directors, producers, some people who I'm still in touch with today and who I still think are some of the most talented people out there, So it was really a kind of hot haven, probably like the way you felt at SNL, really just kind of this like haven of like talent and people, and you constantly felt like you weren't measuring up. I spent the first year on the Daily Show being like, they're going to fire me because they're going to realize like I'm not good at this. I'm not as talented as these other people. I'm not as funny as these other people. I'm not as everyone's like really on their game and has chops and and I'm just this this shopkeeper's son who figured out how to like do Shakespeare and like whatever, what I mean? Like there's definitely a sense of like being around people who you perceive as being way more talented than you are. But I think in a weird way it's a good thing. It's like it was a good thing for me because the insecurity that I felt the first couple of years of being there, feeling like I was completely out of my league, I think caused me to step up. It helped me step up. It helped me like up my game. It helped me absorb, because all I was doing was just absorbing how to be a better writer, how to be a better, when we would do those field pieces, we would go into the edit suite with the editor, and we'd be soup to nuts. We would be working on that thing with the producer, and it helped me in terms of like editing and comedy and how to edit, just everything, like writing comedy to editing comedy to producing comedy, like the whole thing of. I'm not saying I learned everything, but I learned a lot in those years of just working so hands-on in that world, And
when I talk to someone like you, it's like I've known you for a while now, but I've never looked you up. And then I look you up on Wikipedia just to be like, let me read this background. And it is prolific, the amount of things you've done. When I see that, it's like when I talked to Janine Garofalo the other day, and I looked her up because I'd never looked her up because we've been friends for over 20 years.
Right.
I mean, and then it's just like you see the credits and the pedigree and the kind of the lineage and the journey. And it's like there's not enough time to get to everything that I want to talk about. But, I mean, after that, you did The Brink. And you were, on that as both a producer and an actor, from what it said.
Right.
And now you're on Evil.
Yeah.
You're on Evil on CBS.
Yeah.
I mean, so go ahead.
Yeah. No, I was going to say and Evil, which is the most recent thing I'm doing on CBS. I was in London. And that's the wifey telling me. Okay, Aasif, we got a baby. Just to finish up here, like I was basically, I was in London, and I got this audition. It was a pilot audition, and you read a lot of pilots, and this one I read, and I thought, oh, this is good. This is actually pretty good. And I auditioned for it in my hotel room in London, and it was a terrible audition. And I sent it in to Mark Sachs. And Mark, talk about like people who like to help you out in your career. Mark Sachs, who I've gone in for a million times, the casting director here in New York City, called my agent. He called my manager, and he said, listen, I got Aasif's tape, and I know he's in London, and I was shooting another thing there, and he's like, I know it's late at night. He's shooting this thing in his hotel room, but it's not good. And I know he can do a lot better. I don't think this is an indication of the kind of actor he is, and I don't want to show this to the Kings. So can you redo his audition? Which, that rarely happens. And so I said, so my agent said, he wants you to redo the audition. So I said, okay, great. I have a day off in a couple of days. And my agents were like, there's a casting office down the road from where you are, where your hotel is in London. Go there. There's a guy there who'll put you on tape for real. It'll be like a proper thing, like not in your hotel room. Like we'll do it for real, and you can go there. It'll be daytime. It won't be like midnight. So I went in, I did it, I sent it back in, and then Mark Sachs, when I got back to New York, he said, come in and meet the Kings. I went in, met with them, and they cast me on this show, and that's been a whole journey and an incredible experience of another kind, which we'll have to talk about on the next podcast.
But I mean, that show, it's season 2 or season 1?
Season 1. We've been picked up for season 2, which of course now in the coronavirus world, we are trying to figure out how we're going to shoot. I mean, everything in Hollywood is now figuring out how we're going to shoot, but that is, we're hoping to make a season 2 very soon.
So, it seems like you are living the dream right now, but in an ideal world right now, you're living in Gramercy, you've got a, beautiful wife and new son. What does the dream world look like for you? Is it shooting in New York, being picked up in front of your apartment, going to, what does that look like for you?
Look, I mean, last year was an incredible year for me. I did Evil. I did a show that I did out in London. I did a pilot for Apple that I created. The dream for me is to just create content, to continue to create content, not just to be an actor, but also to direct. I want to direct. I'm writing stuff that I'd like to direct, and to direct and produce, and just to continue creating content, and to continue writing and to continue being able to like do that and do stuff that I feel great about and fulfilled about, you know.
Well, I mean,
That's
part of
the dream.
Part of this podcast or conversation too is for me to try to listen and come up with some win-win ideas for the people I talk to. And here's one for you, okay? It's called Shopkeeper's Son. And essentially, it's your journey of these stories you're telling me of a young man in England, a mother encouraging him, going to the library, finding out. And it's basically you get to direct different versions of yourself throughout your life who I mean, these are to direct the young Aasif Mandvi at 14, you know, the one who gets to be in the Merchant Ivory movie, the one who gets to be on the Daily Show, you know. I think, you know, a follow-up to No Land's Man, Shopkeeper's Son to me just pops in terms of hypertext. When I hear Shopkeeper's Son, I just think of a great film, a great story. And so, you know, again, like I appreciate you even doing
I'll
this.
Take that. I'll take that.
The time. Well, I mean, look, I mean, I'd rather have a percentage of something than 100% of nothing. But that is up to you. I mean, whatever you think is fair for Shopkeeper's Son. Look, I mean, again, I know we talked about other projects, but there's so many like things that are like connected. Like when you say Mo Collins, Jerry Collins, her cousin and I worked together at SNL. So and then Michael's where you worked and my friend's good friends with him, and then Corpus Christi that you were turned that down, and I was at Second City at the time and I was trying to write a sketch about Corpus Christi because I was in the new Second City ETC cast. So there's a lot of little things that you mentioned that are just like, wow. These are, you know, and also a mother who encouraged me to, you know, pursue the things that I wanted to do and say, you know, if you want to do it, then you should do these things. You know, there's so many similarities. But again, I think, you know, part of the reason we became fast friends is we would have been friends in 7th grade. And that's the barometer I always use. Like, would I have been friends with this person in 7th grade? Would I have said, you know, come over to my house for dinner or a slumber party? And the answer is yes for you. And, you know, to me, you're someone who always makes it look so easy, you know, and effortless. When I was on stage with you at Steppenwolf and, you know, when I've seen you elsewhere on, you know, TV or film, it just looks so effortless. I know it takes a lot of effort to make the effortful look effortless, but, I mean, I know how hard you work, and I know the Sakina's restaurant journey. But, you know, I count myself lucky that, you know, to me that moment at Steppenwolf brought me some people who hopefully, you know, I can be friends with the rest of my life, however long that is. So I thank you for taking the time to even talk to me today. And I know when I texted you first, you were kind of like, you know, half hour tops.
I know,
so
this was a lot longer than I
So my goal was like, I'm going to keep them on a half hour. I was like, a half hour? Aasif Mandvi's giving me half hour tops for a podcast? I was like, I'm going to keep this guy on the phone for 2 hours. Half hour, hour tops.
So now, okay, it's good. So now you're going to have to explain that to my wife when she's like, what the hell was that?
Well, listen,
I
can't
wait. Me on the other line.
I can't wait to come see Shefali.
I got to jump
and
off.
Again, is that dimple in his chin? Is that real in Ishan's chin? That looks beautiful.
Thing.
All right.
I love you and thank you. And I'm so glad that we did this and we talked. And you know, I'm glad you're in my life and that you're my friend. And when all this is over, we will. You'll come over. You'll meet Ashan, and we'll break a little bread.
Thank you. Have a wonderful afternoon. Thank you.
All right. You too.
Wow, that was Aasif Mandvi, and we talked for an hour and 59 minutes. And I mean, and we didn't even get to Merchant Ivory, and we got to talking about it a little bit, but not even shooting that film, and all the details of that. And we got a little bit into the Daily Show, and we got a little bit of stuff. But again, that one audition that I went to, and I originally auditioned for Martha Lavey and Amy Morton for Glengarry Glen Ross at the Steppenwolf on the morning of 9/11. After it had happened, I walked to the audition, and they still happened to be there. And I auditioned for Glengarry Glen Ross, and that's how, and I knew Martha Lavey because she was one of my early acting teachers with Marianne Siebes, rest in peace, a phenomenal actor and teacher. And I didn't get the role. A better man than I got it by the name of Dave Pasquesi for the role of Roma, that's Steppenwolf. And it was time for me to stay in New York City. And but because of that, they remembered me when Tony Kushner's Homebody Kabul came around, and I auditioned for Frank Galati and Martha Lavey again for the role of Dr. Kari Shah, and somehow got it. The Steppenwolf trusted me to be on their main stage, having never been in a play. And getting into that play brought me to Chicago and brought me friends like Aasif Mandvi and Ariane Moayed and Reed Birney and Firdos Bamji and Jeremy Byler and Chrissy Shields and so many, Marmet Wally and so many others, Tracy Letts, geez, it's just the list goes on. And then I got to work at BAM with some of those folks, and Maggie Gyllenhaal and Bill Camp, and again with Frank Galati and working with Tony Kushner, and so many amazing actors. So thank you if you're still listening. I appreciate it. Please check out thepit-nyc.com for online classes and classes in the real world someday. So I hope this finds you healthy. And if you're not healthy, I hope you get healthy. And once you get healthy, I hope you appreciate your health and stay healthy. So good night, sweet dreams, or good morning, or good afternoon, or hello. But it's just amazing, the journey and the opportunities that I've had, and the fact that I can call someone like that and talk to them. Be well, and I hope to see you someday in the real world. Until then, till we meet again.
Thanks for listening to Global Comedy Studios. Is this a bad time to talk? Stay tuned for more.